Welcome everyone to this public meeting regarding the substantial amendment to the county's community development block grant for mitigation action plan. Throughout the evening, you may hear us use acronyms like CDBG, MIT, mitigation, action plan. This is what we generally refer to. Just to help ground us, for those of you who I haven't had a chance to meet, my name is Douglas Lay. I am with the County of Hawaii Planning Department. And in my role, I manage a team, and part of our responsibility, in addition to supporting the communities in Puna recovering from the 2018 eruption, is the administration of the community development block grants for mitigation and disaster recovery. I think one distinction I'd like to kind of clarify is that the mitigation funds actually support projects all across our island, as the federal government did determine our island as a disaster impacted area during the 2018 eruption. And while the disaster recovery funds are more focused in the Puna regions that were affected in 2018, we're really here to talk about a number of projects that are hopefully can benefit communities island wide. I'd also like to introduce my co-presenter, Jeff Deason, who is the CDBG Mitigation Project Specialist on our staff, and Jen Myers on our team, who is our communications specialist and will be supporting this meeting in the background. I'd like to go through just our high-level agenda today. I will cover, just to help ground us, what is the CDBG mitigation program, and why are we here tonight? Why are we here to talk about a substantial amendment to our action plan? What is the process and how can you get involved? We'll also talk about the amendment itself. What are the proposed changes, and especially how they relate to changes in projects and changes to funding, which I know is really at the core of why we've all come together today, and how folks can participate through the public comment period and what the next steps might look like. I'll just share some general ground rules. We'll try to be very tight with our presentation, and really leave time together for comments and questions. This evening is about informing the broader community about the action plan amendment and what's involved, and to really encourage people and to frame kind of how to participate through this public comment period, which is by submitting comments through the channels we'll talk about later today. But if you have questions while we're doing the presentation, please enter them into the chat function of the Zoom. We'll also hold some time too to kind of if any other questions come up. But we really want to use the chat function as like a question box, so we can make sure that we address them at the end of the more formal presentation of today, and we can have more kind of dialogue and Q&A after that. Jen will, who's on our staff, will lead the moderation of questions. So as a broad overview, the CDBG mitigation program allocated $6.8 million to the county from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. As I mentioned earlier, there's a relationship between the disaster recovery funds the county received, roughly $107 million, and these mitigation funds we're here to talk about tonight. And the mitigation program is used for countywide projects that were identified as eligible hazard mitigation actions or activities in the multi-hazard mitigation plan. More broadly, hazard mitigation is about increasing resilience to disasters and reducing or eliminating long-term risk of loss of life, injury, and damage to property, and really what can come with future disasters that our communities will face. The CDBG mitigation program has goals writ large nationwide, really looking at data-informed investments. And within this work, folks really talk about repetitive loss. Unfortunately, we live in a moment in time right now where any one of our homes or communities could face any number of risks. And a lot of times, too, the federal government, as a steward of our taxpayer dollars, want to be clear that, when we assist people, we only have to assist them once, so they don't have to go through it again. And how do we invest in our community in such a way to avoid future loss? That's really at the core of the mitigation program. There's also a focus on building capacity to really understand risks and create hazard mitigation plans. And in a more upstream kind of approach, the federal government in providing these mitigation funds also really wants to look at policies, planning, both locally and regionally, to look at this concept of risk reduction within the community, right? So kind of reducing the risk we face today against future disasters, based on what we have today in terms of our housing and infrastructure and our built environment, but also as we look to the future, how to think about risk reduction. And a final goal of this program is around kind of maximizing the funds that are available from the federal government and leveraging them against other sources like local funds or philanthropic dollars. Um, I think many folks who are joining us tonight, whether you're from West Hawaii, East Hawaii, North Hawaii, have probably heard about the multi-hazard mitigation plan. Our current adopted multi-hazard mitigation plan is from 2020, and it identified a number of hazard mitigation actions based on different assessments and planning and strategies that were developed. Um, Back in November of this year, I know Civil Defense has been leading a project to update our multi-hazard mitigation plan, which has to be kind of revisited every 5 years. And there's a draft currently kind of out for review that went through a public comment process back in November of 2024. A lot of what we'll talk about is really rooted in the 2020 plan because that's when this program was first conceptualized under the CDBG mitigation program. And of course, the 2025 plan is still under development. So kind of two words that I think get used a lot, but just to help clarify what they mean in this context of our work. Hazard mitigation is the use of long-term and short-term policies, programs, projects that alleviate death, injury, and property damage that can result from a disaster. Risk assessment is a process of measuring the potential loss of life resulting from natural hazards, as well as injury, economic injury, and property damage. And in many respects, we think about vulnerability in terms of people, buildings, and infrastructure, as well as the natural environment and cultural resources to natural hazards. So really think about kind of hazard mitigation as a what that we're trying to solve for, and risk assessment as a how. Like how do we really prioritize and quantify the activity we're trying to do. So in the 2020 multi-hazard mitigation plan, the county led by Civil Defense did a risk assessment and ranking of all these natural hazards that so many parts of our island face, from earthquakes to droughts and floods to wildfires, volcanic eruptions, and tsunami. When we looked at risk assessment and we look at a ranking of hazards, these were the inputs, right? Kind of thinking about probabilities and potentials of occurrence and the impacts on property, people, and the economy. And when it comes to hazards, looking at the weighting of probability impacts, right? So, when we think about hurricanes, which occur every year, but have, over time and historical data, different potentialities, right? Of direct impacts to our island, kind of different impacts, whether it be kind of flooding or wind events. We've really seen different manifestations of how they can impact our communities. Eruptions may be less frequent as they relate to impacting communities and where we live and work, but clearly the impacts are quite significant when they do occur. So in light of it, and this table that we're sharing is from the 2020 multi-hazard mitigation plan, the ranking of the hazard categories by high, medium, low is on the left, and the score in terms of risk assessment is on the right. So as just to focus in on it, wildfire, earthquakes, high windstorms, and tropical cyclones, also known as hurricanes, are really our highest hazard ranking, and also producing the most significant risk in terms of this assessment. And so I wanted to kind of cover that in terms of how we got to where we are with our program, kind of really grounding it in the multi-hazard mitigation plan. And so what was the approach used to identify programs under the CDBG mitigation program? So really $6.8 million provides a unique opportunity for the county. These funds aren't generally available to counties like ourselves and our communities, but for a natural disaster that has occurred. And a fundamental requirement is that programs and projects have a tie back to hazard mitigation actions in the multi-hazard mitigation plan. The 2020 version being our starting point, and soon enough, our 2025 update. Um, because these funds are also administered by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and they are falling within the community development block grant funds, there is always an identification of benefit to low to moderate income residents. Low and moderate income residents aren't the only beneficiaries, but HUD always wants to understand, how their investments are supporting communities that may have low and moderate income residents relative to communities that are more economically diverse. So this is always a framework we think about. And 3 years ago, when we set out on the program that we're now looking to amend, we looked to identify opportunities that were shovel ready. Projects that we knew with X amount of investment, with the resources we have, could really get to an outcome, get to a project getting done. And on a more technical side, HUD, who funds this work, and also FEMA, who's a partner to HUD in this area of work in the federal agencies, really looks to protect community lifelines. So community lifelines are our supply chains, our telecommunications networks, our road systems. These are things that, when they aren't available to us, really increase risk, and when they are functioning during and after a disaster, can really help mitigate risk, really help us get onto our path to recovery. And finally, from a technical perspective, and this is across all these mitigation grants, 5% of funds can be allocated towards administration of the funds, and up to 15% can be allocated towards planning activities in the HUD framework. So these include technical studies, code amendments, and the like. And today we'll be talking about projects that are under consideration for amendment, more so in the planning activities category that Jeff will describe in a little bit. So for the county to receive and administer these funds, we developed an action plan that's available on our website that Jen can share in the chat briefly. When a change needs to happen, when we're looking to reprioritize funding or reprioritize work through projects, it is what HUD calls a substantial amendment. And there's essentially three triggers for a substantial amendment. A change to a program benefit or eligibility of an existing program. If we were to looking to change benefit eligibility, we have to do a substantial amendment. If we are reallocating funds over 10% of the total grant, that is also trigger for a substantial amendment. And if we are adding or deleting activities, which is, we are really in this third category of why we are looking for public comment on the substantial amendment currently. And so I hope this is helpful to kind of ground really the changes that we're looking to make with our program, based on the input we've already started to receive, and what we look to hear from you today. A substantial amendment essentially, and rightfully so, requires this kind of public meeting, right? This kind of public input, the comments we've been receiving. And so this is why we come to you, and we appreciate everyone taking the time to join us. With that, I'll hand it off to Jeff to walk us through the next portion.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Jeff Deason. I'm a project specialist with the Planning Department and the Disaster Recovery Division, and these projects fall under my purview. And so I kind of want to talk a little bit about what our proposed amendment is. So the proposed amendment changes for the substantial amendment are elimination of Section 3.1, revision to zoning and subdivision codes. These funds were not needed in that project. They were able to find the funding elsewhere. And so we were able to move these funds to another project. The other one is change in the flood study scope. We eliminated a Puna and Kohala study, as they are looking to do that in a different manner, and they will be funded with other sources. And then addition of this Waikoloa Wildfire Evacuation Study. Also, there's some other changes to our action plan which are not substantial in nature. Updates to the timeline for public comment from 45 days to 30 days. Updating information regarding the 2025 multi-hazard mitigation update, and updates to information on the Citizen Advisory Committee. as well as reallocation of ARC GIS funding to fire equipment for updates in how we're funding these fire equipment and what is needed for that. And then also general project timeline updates. So there is a 30-day public comment period, runs from March 31st to April 29th. You can see the link there if you would like to submit a comment. And you can also submit by US mail to the addresses that you see there. And we will assemble all of those comments and include them within the amendment itself that we send to HUD. Once we send that to HUD, then they have a set time period to respond to that. Okay, so here's kind of the meat and potatoes of what we're trying to do here. So you'll see the budget on the right, and in the use of funds, you can see that we've taken funds away from the ArcGIS data management project, which they have funded elsewhere, and we have moved it to the wildfire equipment purchase. And in that purchase, we're buying. There's two different wildfire purchases, but essentially what it comes down to when you total it is we are buying three brush trucks, a mobile command vehicle, and then what's called a tender, which is really a trailer that they can use to transport these brush trucks around the island to the places where they're needed. The other big change you'll see is down in the planning dollars. We already talked about the revisions to the zoning and subdivision codes, but those funds will be redirected into the wildfire evacuation study that we're considering today. So the next steps to this process is after the 30-day public comment period is over, we'll respond to those public comments received. The county will make updates to the amendment, and then we'll submit it to HUD. And then once it is approved by HUD, the county proceeds with the transfer of funds through the grant agreement. So that's kind of it in a nutshell as far as what we're trying to do and why we're trying to move the funds around. And at this time, we would love to have comments or anything that you would like to discuss regarding this amendment.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. And so we can transition now to kind of the Q&A portion of our meeting today. I haven't seen any comments come into the chat yet, so if folks have, please feel free to share through the chat function. And if so, we want to try to capture questions best we can there. And while people are thinking about the questions, just want to share about where we are now. Since, as Jeff mentioned, we opened the public comment period on March 31st. We received about 20 plus comments from members of the community. And I think it's fair to say that they've generally fallen into the bucket of, really seeing the need for funding for a study, but also recognizing in tandem that there have been evacuation routes themselves, right, that have been identified by the community and are significant priorities for the community. For this evening, we are really kind of at a place of wanting to provide this information. If there are questions for clarification about the funding piece, being able to reallocate these funds towards the evacuation study, we are definitely here for that. But I also recognize that the physical infrastructure that will be needed, right? The roads, both kind of Hulu and Kamakoa, are priorities for folks. Yeah, the fuller testimony, please do kind of submit it via email, as you see on the screen here. But since we haven't gotten more direct chats and some interest, we could definitely kind of transition into the virtual room we have today. But also because we're joined by Councilmember Hustis. I don't know if don't mean to put you on the spot, but if you had anything you wanted to share or just to open us up with. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks, Jeff, and thanks, Jen. I really appreciate you leading this tonight's meeting. Thank you for taking the time to engage with the community here. And I really want to hear from the community members if that's possible. But you know, in full support of the reallocation for the funds for this and identifying the needs and the specific needs for the Waikoloa community as we identify the most significant routes and the challenges and the hurdles for the community. And the community members here, there are a lot of community members from Waikoloa that can attest to the challenges that already exist. And so that definitely needs to be documented in this path going forward, and appreciate you engaging with them. And I'd love to hear their thoughts on it for sure. But once again, thank you for having this. And it's good to see the community come out and kind of engage with you on this process. So mahalo.
Yeah, 100%, council member. Thank you for that. Yeah, and so I think with that, maybe I'll hand it off to Jen if you want to kind of folks who are in the chat, maybe those who've asked to speak in terms of their questions. We can start there.
Yep, we've got a question from Shelley. She asks, is there a timeline on the study?
I can speak to that. So once we do this substantial review and HUD reviews it, if we get that done in May and they have 60 days to review it, that means that it will come back in July. And our goal is to have identified by that time who we would like to do the study. Now, in talking to potential vendors, I think at the long term, it would be about a year to get the study done. At the short term, less than that. But I think if we anticipate a year to get everything done, that's probably accurate.
Right on. Okay, so now next we've got Matthew who asks, are the federal funds that are in hand? And if not, is there a contingency if the federal government rescinds the funds? If you want to go ahead and take those first two. Basically, in summary, he says, what happened to the RFP that was issued in February?
Yeah,
I can speak to that as
please,
well.
Jeff.
So the federal funds have not been rescinded and they were allocated by Congress, and nothing has happened to those funds as of yet. And so we are proceeding with our projects. And as far as the RFP that was issued, the goal behind that was to gauge the level of interest in vendors and the experience level of vendors who provide these types of service. And maybe if I could step back a little bit from that and talk a little bit about how this came about. When we knew we had these extra funds, then we engaged with civil defense, fire, and the police force, the first responders who would handle a situation like this when it came up. And our goal was to discuss how we could assist Waikoloa Village, but also how we can create a template which could be used further down the line for other communities that have similar issues of ingress and egress. And so from the public service standpoint, from the first responder standpoint, identifying vulnerable populations and working with the community to have a study that impacts them and that takes into account everything that you have already learned and experienced, because we know that there's a really strong wildfire prevention presence in Waikoloa already. So our goal was to engage vendors to see what their thoughts were on how to craft such a study. And to answer another question I saw in the chat, we fully understand that sometimes there are studies and that they are set on a shelf, and I get that. But what we're trying to do here is, by fully engaging the community, have kind of a living document that can almost act as a phase one for identifying future actions. Like, we all know that the secondary road is is a future action. So that doesn't need to be identified, but the time it takes to evacuate the village and how to get people out and who are our vulnerable populations, how many people live in each house, those types of things can really help our first responders to be able to act and act quickly and know a timeline that they need to meet to evacuate. Like, what is it? Is it 3 hours? I mean, how quickly does it need to happen? So those are the types of things that we want to look at.
Okay, the next question is from Bob, who asks, where can we see a description of the scope of the study, and when will we be able to have an opportunity to comment on that scope?
So the scope of the study, it was released as an RFP through the county. And so those documents are available online to be seen, if I'm not correct. And you can go and see the scope of the study there. And the idea is that once a vendor is selected, that there will be a lot of public engagement around not only the scope of the study, but also heavily weighted toward the beginning of the study so that people have an opportunity to input at that time.
And I reposted the website for anyone who's interested in going to see where all the documents are. Shelley says this might be for Councilmember Hustis. Is the county prepared to allocate the funds to address the recommendations once the study is complete? The assumption is that the study will determine that there is a need that will require funding.
Shall I take that one then? Yeah, it's some of those discussions have happened to an extent in our recent departmental budget hearings, especially with regard to a permanent arterial road for the county. And I just want to thank the community members that came out to testify during the budget hearings. This is an ongoing process at the county level, and I will be having ongoing conversations with administration as we identify those CIP needs for the county. And then the mayor has his second draft of the budget, which he'll submit to the council on May 5th. So that will be not too far off now, but we'll see if those amendments and those suggestions by myself, by community members make that second draft of the budget. But you have my commitment to make some of those additions and changes as I see from the community as well. And it'll be interesting to see what other additions come out of the study. I know there's those large capital improvements that the community is looking for, but I am curious to see, how the timing relates, identifying the vulnerable populations, and what recommendations can be made to our first responders with regards to, I've heard conversations about, zone identification in the community, the limitations, the constraints the community has. So really being clear on all the assets we have in the community and how we can improve those going forward. But I am committed to making these changes for sure. So thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Next question is from Jane. They ask, can the study not be done faster than taking a year?
I can speak to that. I think we would love to have the study be done in the year or less. Obviously, as quickly as possible would be great. But we're also interested in getting the best information that we can. And I don't want to make a promise to the community that something is going to happen quicker than it is. So I would say that a year is a conservative estimate, and we would hope to have it done quicker than that. And I can certainly understand the level of anxiety in the community given what's happened. And we are very conscious of that. And we want to get it done as quickly as possible, but we also want it to be thorough and taking into account everything that needs to be considered.
Yeah, and Jen, before we get to the next question, can I kind of add on to Jeff's and then maybe also address the question that Julia's sharing too? I really welcome the questions about kind of the what we're looking to do, right? And today the meeting is really also about the how, right? Can we really prioritize take the steps we need to take to prioritize these funds to be able to go towards this study. Um, I think a theme from today is like action. And I want to acknowledge and really emphasize one piece in that this work is not being led by the planning department. In many respects, we're here because we administer the funds. But we felt it was really important, and I know everyone in the county family agrees, for civil defense, fire, and police, even if they may not be planners in the traditional sense, they are who we rely upon, and they have the on the ground knowledge as well as you all do, right? Better than planners do. No offense to planners like myself. And we that's really kind of the focus and the mandate we see in doing this work. Paniolo, Hulu, Kamakoa, right? Those are the roads we know. We know the housing that's built today. We know about all the subdivisions that have been approved, also known as all the entitlements, right? And so I think a commitment we're making as we get into the focus of the study is to not approach it from like a pie in the sky, but to really just capture what we know, what we hear from each of you as members of the public, um, and to start translating that into actionable information. And so I hope that helps to kind of clarify some of the pieces here as well. I think Julia's suggestion around kind of living what's possible, through a mock evacuation, um, is it definitely kind of it's like a sibling to, even if it may not be kind of a direct action of the study, right? But I think that's also why civil defense, our uniformed officers, the CERT team, which I know is very strong in the Waikoloa community, are all could all really be a part of that. And so I think it's like yes, a great suggestion. While we also kind of have that process inform the study we hope to launch, and vice versa.
And then the last question from Julia, I'm not sure if you addressed that or not, Douglas, asking if a mock or a live
Yeah.
evacuation would bolster the study.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about it with civil defense, police, and fire, as we get the project going. Thanks for the question.
Okay, next
Yeah.
question is from
Yeah.
Bob.
I can take that because
Go for
I
it.
think that's something too. So appreciate if I can understand the question, Bob. Yes, the RFP that was released and we've gotten proposals back on was posted on the county's public purchase website. That's a website where the county and governments all over the country um, uh, kind of put things out for bid, whether we're buying, you know, steel-toed boots or vehicles or services. I think one thing we can do based on the interest is, Jeff and I and Jen can work on posting the RFP to our public-facing website because, not all of us are vendors. That might be on the purchasing website. And it is public record. We cannot kind of yet share kind of the proposal we've gotten back and all that. That will come. But I appreciate the question, right? Because we want to make sure that that could be available for folks, if that's helpful.
All right. And then the next question's from David, who says, do you foresee any resistance to your proposed amendments and the funds becoming available?
So I want to honor this public comment process. The evidence we have so far, both from the 20 plus comments we received and I think the focus of the questions here this evening, indicate strong support. The action before us is really around reallocating funds to one project to this priority project that would look at evacuation for Waikoloa. We haven't received any um, negative comments, right? Folks who think it's a bad idea, for lack of a better framing. Um, and I also want to say too that, in our administration of this program, Jen, Jeff, and I meet on a monthly basis with the staff at HUD, those who will be kind of um, looking at our proposed amendment when we submit it in May. Um, you know, again, I don't have a crystal ball, but what I know is that we've been in pretty constant communication with them about why this is a priority, how we're pursuing it. Um, I think they, like us, want to hear from you all, right? So that it can inform their decision. And so a long way of saying that we haven't seen much resistance and we don't expect it. I think it's also important to acknowledge that the same HUD team that we've been working with since 2020 is now supporting the community on Maui and everything they're going through, right? And so um, I think there's just an overall recognition um, that that there's a need here, and this is one where we're trying to take action on the need in the Waikoloa community. So resistance from the agency. This would be HUD is the question, maybe, yeah, the federal agency funding it. They have been excited about wanting to support this and want to hear from the public about it before they make a final decision, which we'll submit to them in May. So no resistance from the federal agency, if that more directly answers your question, David.
Seeing the next question from Julia. I'm not sure if you can see it,
Yeah,
Douglas, but
I
she
can.
asked yeah, go ahead.
Well, thanks, Julia. Yes, I mean, I think any and all data, especially kind of what happened after the Mana Road fire, would be very beneficial. Um, if you have that available that in a way that can be shared via email, then please include it in that email address you see kind of here, and that's the easiest way to get it to us. But if it's not so simple, like it's on a CD or it's in a document itself, or it can be shareable in that respect, please also don't hesitate to reach out to us through this email, and we will contact you to make sure that the team working on this will have that knowledge. And I can appreciate that it's an Excel file that needs sussing. Thank you. Yeah, we just want to make sure we don't lose it. So thanks for the offer.
Great. That's the last of the questions that we have right now on our chat, and I don't see any hands up. So should we give people just a moment more to decide if they want to ask?
So, as folks are taking a moment with any final questions, I'm glad that, this could be helpful. And like we mentioned at the onset, we're recording this meeting to post it on the website. So you give us a business day or so, you will see this recording on our CDBG mitigation website. To Bob's point, we will share a copy of the RFP that was released as well for people's awareness. There's really like 4 pages of the scope that you want to care about. There's a lot of kind of contract type language that comes with all county RFPs. But please encourage, your family, your neighbors who care about this to talk about it, to submit their comments. That email or by writing or in person at either the planning offices in Kailua Kona or Hilo are the best ways. And have them check out the recording if you felt like this was helpful in terms of the questions you had or any concerns you might have had before joining us this evening. Great. So we appreciate the appreciation. And thanks everyone for joining us and for sharing. We know that there's a lot of work to come with the study, with the capital improvements that council member kind of spoke to, which are super important. And thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. And please look out for more information. The deadline to submit comments is April 29th. And please do it. Please share your thoughts by then. We'll be as fast as we can to prepare that, submit it to HUD. And you'll also see a summary of all the comments that we get. And so look out for that as well. So you hear what your neighbors are also sharing. Well, great. Again, can't thank you enough. I don't know, Jeff, you have any final comments before we wrap up?
I just want to say I appreciate your time, and I do want to kind of preface it by saying that, civil defense, fire, and the police team are all really interested in having something that is a usable living document. So that is our goal, is to make sure that whatever we do is not something that sits on a shelf, but is something that is really useful for the community. And again, we're hoping it becomes a template for other communities that share some similar issues.